The Backrooms. You've been here before. Object number 87. Worn sack. Worn sacks are a rare type of storage that have large room for carrying capacity. Image caption. A standard worn sack made by Coco. Description. A worn sack is a bag that can be made using a mobile vacuum cleaner's MVC's debris container. In order to create a worn sack, you must first have a bag that has been used to a quote-unquote worn state. A worn state typically means a state where the bag has been used to a point of looking different from when it was first made. A worn state typically requires the following: discoloration, scruff marks, tears that have been repaired through sewing or patching, and stains. Though the bag must be in a worn state, there appears to be a limit to how worn it can be. The following have been observed to be quote-unquote overworn: burn marks, irreparable tears, open holes, stains from cashew water. Once you have a suitable bag, you must then obtain the container used by MVCs to store debris. In order to obtain one, simply locate an MVC, then dismantle it and obtain its debris container. Once acquired, there is a very difficult process involved in order to create a worn sack. There are multiple known groups capable of making worn sacks, though they keep their processes secret and have been known to get violent when attempts are made to learn them. Worn sacks are highly valued containers within the backrooms. This is due to the large amount of storage space within the worn sack. The space inside of a worn sack is around 700 meters cubed. The weight will always be 0.5 pounds, no matter how much is stored inside the sack. Worn sacks are known to be made with special connective currents, allowing them to circulate air at a rate being breathable. Due to this, you are able to stay inside a worn sack for around 1 hour before experiencing hypoxia. The walls inside of a worn sack, as well as the floor, resemble the material of the worn sack itself. This means that if a bag is made of textile covering, the entirety of the inside of a worn sack will be made of textile covering. To exit, just imagine an exit and leave. You will reappear right next to the spot where you last placed your worn sack, with it on your back. Known groups that make worn sacks. The occult. This group is a very mysterious group, though it has been confirmed that they were once part of the Backrooms non-aligned trade group. They hold many secrets and don't appear to have a base of any kind. They can be found wandering any level which is somewhat safe, and they have access to weaponry to defend themselves. They are most commonly identifiable by the marking on their heads, which has been said to resemble an axe and a heart. Due to this marking, they can commonly be seen wearing white gloves worn by butlers. If recognized, they will stay passive unless provoked. If a good enough deal is struck, they will be willing to trade to make a worn sack. Their price is typically low, mostly consisting of basic survival needs such as food and water. The Lost. Many members of the Lost are capable of making worn sacks. They are not open to trading, however, meaning that it is very difficult to obtain a worn sack from this group. If you manage to gain the trust of any member with knowledge of worn sacks, they may be willing. For a much more risky alternative, some members of the Lost would be willing to make a worn sack if you threaten them. However, you cannot threaten them into showing you how to make a worn sack, and attempts to do so will prove futile. Known people that make worn sacks. Iravan, the Moon Man. This man can be seen wandering any floor that has to do with Asian culture or the night. He is quite friendly when approached. However, he can be hostile when provoked, and seems to be adept in many forms of combat. He is willing to make worn sacks, and will rarely charge you. Syphilis. A very old woman. She spends her time knitting on level 98. If you approach her with the necessary materials to make a worn sack, she will invite you to sit down. After talking to you for a while about small topics such as weather, she will begin to sing a random lullaby. After inevitably falling asleep, you will awaken to find yourself having a worn sack and a small pocket knife. Syphilis will be sitting in a different booth, knitting once more. She seems to have very little knowledge. However, she does have some connection to the kitchen. Mortimer. Very little is known about Mortimer, his motivations, or his identity. He will sometimes be seen on any of the rooms on level 4, though he can sometimes be found in the anti-reality bowling alley. How he gets to these places is unknown, as he has never been sighted on level 4 or level 178. He will be willing to make you a worn sack if you are capable of solving a random equation, typically related to Voronoi diagrams. If you are incapable of answering, he will simply state, quote, "Maybe for another time then," end quote. After stating this, you will pass out for 3 hours, awakening in the same place. If solved, you will still pass out for 3 hours. However, you will awaken on level 6.1 with a worn sack. Quote-unquote, a wizard, a person of unknown origins, sometimes presents as male, sometimes as female, occasionally will be presented as androgynous. Age appears to be 6 to 8. However, estimated age is 56, most commonly found on level 178.1. However, they can be found on virtually any level suitable for humans. Rare sightings have confirmed that they are capable of accessing secret levels, such as level Fun, smiley face, level Dead, and even level I. When asked to make a worn sack, they will make one around 70% of the time. Whenever they don't, they will simply state they aren't up for it at the moment. When they do, your eyes will suddenly blink, no matter how hard you attempt to keep your eyes open. If you lack eyelids, you will simply have static vision for a moment. When opened, a worn sack will appear in front of you. Coco, a female German shepherd who can be seen wandering level 241, though she lives in Coco's bedroom. Whenever approached with materials required for a worn sack, the dog will plead for the materials. If given, she will pick both up and walk out of sight. If followed, she will begin to run and will speed up consistently until out of sight. Once out of sight, she will disappear, then reappear, walking back with a worn sack around 26 hours later. If you're in a room with no doorways and under camera surveillance, the cameras will cut out and she will appear behind you. Zarian the Awesome Kid will make you a worn sack if given materials and food, or if he feels scared of you. It is advised to give him materials, unless you can't. He can most commonly be found on the hub. However, he sometimes goes up to level 4. He claims to be capable of going to the front rooms and being a quote-unquote reality-bending prodigy. Investigations into this are impossible. However, experts in identifying lies have proven that these are false claims. No one. This is no one. He will not make you a worn sack. Worn sack appears in front of you, from nowhere in particular. You do not know nothing about nothing mysterious. Million the Multi-Man. Million is a strange individual who seems to hold no regard about others' opinions of him. He is most commonly found on level 6.1, though he will also go to level 11 occasionally. When encountered, he will ramble on about random topics which interest him and is known for being extremely blunt with his words and phrases. He will actively insult others to them, causing many to be provoked. However, he is very skilled in combat, and, if necessary, he can easily neutralize any opponent. When certain words are stated directly to him, he will enter a quote-unquote active state. One of these phrases being worn sack. When stated directly in front of him, everyone in the nearby vicinity will pass out for exactly 1 hour. This includes anyone who has a direct line of sight with him. Near immediately, Million will make a worn sack, but only if the materials are available directly. Million will then disappear and reappear in a random location on the same level. This specific kind of way to make a worn sack is one of the few ways it can be made from an MVC directly, rather than having to dismantle one. Maker. Maker is a person who is always awaiting on level 2.2, typically far away from the hives. They seem to have friendly terms with the empire of bees, and know how to avoid phantom bees. When asked to make a worn sack, they will simply reply, quote, only at the queen's courtesy, end quote. If you then gain the trust of any queen, the queen will say that you're allowed to have a worn sack. Thereafter, Maker seems to gain knowledge of this interaction and will create you a worn sack. Willow Wisp. Willow Wisp is an unknown type of entity, though they resemble a spirit. Willow Wisp can be found roaming level 6, which makes it very difficult to reach them. They tend to be drawn to newcomers and will seek them out. Almond water has no effect on them, and they cannot be attacked in any way. They are non-hostile and will make you a worn sack, provided you have all the materials. Afterwards, they will materialize for a moment and push you, causing you to reappear in level 6.1. Moon Dude. Not to be confused with Aravan, the Moon Man, this person has no known name and will respond to any touch or audio cues. He is found on level 24 in the core of the level, typically pulling out plastic from the moon base itself. When asked to make a worn sack, he will ask for the materials and bury them underneath the plastic. He will then walk off. Once dug back up, a worn sack will be in the hole. He appears incredibly rarely and can only be sighted by one person at a time. Any people who provoke him go missing for unknown reasons. The Artist of level 57. For unknown reasons, the artist is capable of painting a worn sack. However, she will only paint one if the materials are given to her. Once hung up, you can no-clip into the painting, which will cause you to reappear in the entrance of level 57 with a worn sack on your back. The Party Goers. We can make you a very nice worn sack, smiley face. Come visit us at Level Fun, smiley face. Meg Report Log. Well, yes, worn sacks have been seen in Level Fun. They lay around and are not used. More importantly, going to Level Fun is suicide. Don't trust this message. The Morgana Council. If you visit level 777 and gain the trust of any of the council members, they all seem able to create a worn sack. This follows with the ability to bend the level to their advantage, as well as their overall powers of creation. If you have the necessary materials, this gamble will be cheap, likely costing not much more than the body of a wretch. However, without the materials, the gamble will raise drastically. The most likely gamble is your most prized memory. However, they are willing to trade other things, such as both of your legs. If you win, a worn sack will materialize in front of you, and will be given to you. Certain casinos are also capable of making worn sacks. However, the council members seem to be the most reliable in providing the materials. If possible, opt for the other casinos, as the council members will not hold back. Otomari's Dog. Otomari can be found on level 7, more commonly the Calamari Room. Otomari's dog seems capable of making a worn sack, but only if Otomari gives him permission. To gain Otomari's permission, simply compliment her until she likes you, and she will let the dog make one. The dog will leave the room, to which Otomari will wait quietly. There are reports of others, however, these individuals have been proven most reliable in making worn sacks.